could you embarrass me like that?
What's going on?
That boy was mauling her on the balcony.
It was just a kiss.
He kissed you?
Yeah.
Behind Fran Fine's fabulous wardrobe and nasal laugh lies a treasure trove of bizarre secrets. From an Arkansas-born British butler who fooled UK viewers, to Donald Trump demanding a script rewrite, to a real-life marriage dissolving while fake romance bloomed on screen. Here are 15 weird facts you didn't know about. The Nanny Fact 1. The show was almost pitched without a pitch.
Fran.
Yeah, honey.
Fran, does it show yet?
Wait a second. What are you talking about? This what show?
In 1991, Fran Drescher and her then-husband, Peter Mark Jacobson, found themselves sitting on a transatlantic flight to London when fate intervened in the most unexpected way. Drescher struck up a conversation with the passenger sitting next to her, who happened to be Jeff Sagansky, the president of CBS at the time. They chatted throughout the flight, and by the time they landed, Sagansky was so charmed by Drescher's personality and distinctive voice that he told her to come pitch him a show when she got back to Los Angeles. There was just one massive problem with this incredible opportunity. Drescher and Jacobson had absolutely nothing to pitch. They had no concept, no characters, no story, and no idea whatsoever for a television series. The pressure was enormous because you don't just waste a meeting with a network president, especially when that meeting came from a chance encounter 30,000 feet in the air. While they were in London, desperately trying to come up with something worthwhile, inspiration finally struck in the most ordinary of circumstances. Drescher went shopping with Twiggy's daughter, and during their outing, she started thinking about her own life, growing up in Queens, and how funny it would be to see someone like her transplanted into a wealthy, sophisticated British household. The contrast between her working-class Jewish upbringing and the refined world of Manhattan's elite suddenly seemed like comedy gold. That shopping trip became the genesis of the entire series, turning a woman from Flushing, Queens, into one of television's most beloved characters and launching a show that would run for 6 seasons and become an international sensation. Fact 2. The pilot had a completely different theme song.
We gotta plan something special for your sweet 16. You know, with my panache and your father's checkbook, we could be 2 chicks in a Aruba. That's what we could be.
Show's entire 6-season run. Instead of the now iconic opening tune that fans can sing by heart, the pilot featured a completely different song called If My Friends Could See Me Now, from the 1960s Broadway musical Sweet Charity. The song was written by the legendary composer Cy Coleman with lyrics by Dorothy Fields, and it had been a showstopper when Gwen Verdon performed it in the original 1966 production. The choice made sense on paper because the lyrics perfectly captured the rags-to-riches fantasy of Fran Fine's situation, with lines about suddenly living in luxury and mingling with high society. The song's upbeat, brassy energy also matched the show's tone and Fran's larger-than-life personality. However, after the pilot aired, producers and network executives decided the show needed something more distinctive and memorable, something that would immediately set it apart from every other sitcom on television at the time. They commissioned a brand new theme song that told Fran's backstory in a clever, conversational way, complete with details about her broken engagement in the bridal shop in Flushing, Queens, and how she ended up on the doorstep of the Sheffield mansion. This new theme song, performed by Drescher herself, became one of the most recognizable television theme songs of the 1990s. It was catchy, funny, and it gave viewers all the context they needed in less than a minute. The switch proved to be the right decision because that theme song became as much a part of the show's identity as Fran's laugh or her spectacular wardrobe. Fact 3. UK viewers thought the British actor was faking it.
Hey, be nicer to your sister.
Why? Because we're a family?
Yes, that's right. And someday your father's gonna be old and sick. You're gonna want him to live with her.
One of the strangest controversies surrounding The Nanny happened when the show began airing in the United Kingdom, and it involved a complaint that was completely backwards from reality. British viewers started writing letters and making phone calls to complain about Charles Shaughnessy's performance as Maxwell Sheffield, specifically targeting what they perceived as his terrible, inauthentic British accent. They found his delivery embarrassing and suggested that if the producers were going to cast an American actor to play a British character, they should at least have him take accent lessons from Daniel Davis, who played the butler Niles, and whose British accent sounded impeccable and genuine to their ears. The irony of these complaints was absolutely hilarious because the viewers had it completely wrong. Charles Shaughnessy was born in London, England in 1955 and is genuinely British, with his accent being completely authentic because it's his natural way of speaking. He comes from British theatrical royalty, as his father was Alfred Shaughnessy, a well-known television producer and writer who worked on the long-running British series Upstairs, Downstairs. Meanwhile, Daniel Davis, whose accent the British viewers praised as authentic and wanted Shaughnessy to emulate, was actually born in Little Rock, Arkansas, and was completely faking his refined British butler accent throughout the entire series. Davis had trained extensively in classical theater and had perfected a transatlantic accent through years of stage work, but he was about as British as apple pie and baseball. The mix-up perfectly demonstrates how good actors can be at their craft and how audiences can be fooled by exceptional performances. Fact 4. The set had a hidden runway built into it.
Yenna! Stand back.
Fran Drescher understood something crucial about the Nanny from the very beginning, which was that fashion would be just as important to the show as the comedy and the characters. She knew that her wardrobe would become a defining feature of the series, so she made sure that the actual physical construction of the Sheffield Mansion set would accommodate her vision for showcasing those fabulous outfits. Working closely with the set designers during the pre-production phase, Drescher specifically requested that the mansion's main floor be designed with what she called a runway layout, with long, clear sight lines that would allow the cameras to capture full-body shots of her walking through the space from multiple angles. The set featured a grand staircase that became Fran's signature entrance point, allowing her to descend dramatically while the cameras captured every detail of whatever spectacular ensemble she was wearing that week. The layout included wide hallways and an open floor plan that gave cinematographers plenty of room to film tracking shots that followed Drescher as she moved through the house, essentially turning everyday scenes into impromptu fashion shows. The living room, kitchen, and foyer were all strategically positioned so that cameras could catch her from the front, side, and back, ensuring that viewers at home could see every angle of outfits that often cost thousands of dollars and came from top designers. This deliberate design choice transformed the Sheffield Mansion into more than just a backdrop for the story. It became a stage for fashion, with Fran's wardrobe essentially functioning as a co-star of the show and helping to make the Nanny a style icon of the 1990s. Fact 5. CC's dog actually hated her in real life.
Oop, I'm dating myself.
Dating yourself? That's pathetic. Even you can do better than you.
Chester the Pomeranian was a recurring character on The Nanny, and the running gag throughout the series was that this adorable little dog absolutely despised CC. Babcock, while loving Fran Fine, which created countless comedic moments as the prissy dog would growl at, bite, or generally antagonize Maxwell's business partner. What viewers didn't know was that this entire dynamic wasn't written into the script first and then performed by a trained animal actor. It was actually based on real-life behavior that the writers simply incorporated into the show because they couldn't change it. Chester was Fran Drescher's own dog in real life, and from the very first moment the Pomeranian met actress Lauren Lane, who played CC, the dog took an instant and fierce dislike to her for reasons nobody could ever quite figure out. During filming, Chester would actively try to bite Lane whenever she came near him, and the animal's hostility toward her was so consistent and so obvious that the producers decided to just write it into the show rather than fight against it. Meanwhile, Chester adored Drescher and would happily perform any scene with her, sitting calmly in her lap or following her around the set between takes. The contrast was so stark that it made perfect sense to turn the dog's genuine preferences into a character trait that supported the show's central conflict between Fran and CC. The writers were essentially letting Chester play himself, with his real feelings toward the two actresses becoming part of the comedy. This meant that whenever you saw Chester snarling at CC or refusing to cooperate with her on screen, that wasn't just good acting or animal training. That was a dog genuinely expressing his dislike for someone, which makes those scenes even funnier when you know the truth behind them. Fact 6. 2 pregnant actresses, 0 attempts to hide it.
I like it. I wonder how long it's gonna last.
During season 5 of The Nanny, the production faced a situation that has derailed many television shows throughout history when not 1 but 2 actresses became pregnant at the same time. Lauren Lane, who played CC Babcock, and Rachel Chagall, who played Val Torriello, were both expecting babies during filming, and their growing bellies were becoming increasingly difficult to conceal. However, instead of resorting to the usual television tricks of hiding pregnant actresses behind furniture, having them carry large boxes or laundry baskets in every scene, or shooting them only from the chest up, the producers made an unusual decision. They simply didn't hide the pregnancies at all. Both actresses continued to appear on screen with their pregnant bellies fully visible, and the show never addressed it or wrote pregnancy storylines for either character. The writers did occasionally have some fun with the situation, most notably in one episode where CC appeared on screen carrying an enormous potted plant while making a reference to Seinfeld, the hit NBC sitcom that had famously gone to elaborate lengths to hide Julia Louis-Dreyfus's pregnancy by having her character Elaine hold massive purses and stand behind furniture in nearly every scene during the show's later seasons. The Nanny's approach was refreshingly honest and surprisingly ahead of its time, especially considering that this was the mid to late 1990s when most television productions still felt obligated to pretend that actresses' bodies never changed and that pregnancy needed to be hidden from viewers unless it was explicitly part of the storyline. The decision worked because both characters were supporting players rather than leads, which meant their appearances could be limited when necessary, and viewers either didn't notice or didn't care about the unexplained pregnancy bumps. Fact 7. Renee Taylor gained 35 pounds, eating on screen.
What if I marry a wealthy man who insists I produce an heir?
Oh, stop deluding yourself. Go ahead and have the vasectomy.
Renee Taylor, who played Fran's overbearing mother, Sylvia Fine, found herself facing an unexpected occupational hazard that most actors never have to worry about during the run of The Nanny. Her character was written as someone who loved to eat and was constantly snacking, cooking, or enjoying elaborate meals, which meant that Taylor spent a significant portion of her screen time actually consuming food on camera. In most television productions, actors fake eating by pushing food around their plates or taking tiny bites that they spit out between takes. But the pace and style of filming on The Nanny meant that Taylor often had to actually eat real food, take after take after take, especially when scenes required multiple camera angles or when something went wrong and required additional filming. Over the course of the series, this constant on-camera eating added up in a way that nobody had anticipated. Taylor eventually gained 35 pounds from all the food she consumed during filming, and the weight gain became serious enough that she had to take action. She eventually brought a doctor's note to the set that explicitly stated she could only eat low-fat options during filming for health reasons. The production accommodated her request, and the prop department switched to providing healthier alternatives whenever Sylvia's scenes involved food, though they made sure everything still looked authentic on camera. Taylor handled the situation with humor, later joking about it in interviews and acknowledging that getting paid to eat constantly sounds like a dream job until you actually have to do it day after day for 6 years. The experience highlighted one of the lesser-known challenges of playing a character whose defining traits involve food. Fact 8. Donald Trump demanded a script rewrite.
Maggie, go see if you can find some bottles. Niles, do we have any old nipples around the house? Hello, hello?
When The Nanny landed a celebrity guest appearance from Donald Trump in Season 4, the production team thought it would be a straightforward cameo requiring minimal fuss. But they quickly learned that Trump had very specific ideas about how he should be portrayed on television. After the script was written and sent to Trump's office for approval, which is standard practice for celebrity cameos, his assistant called the producers with a request that caught everyone off guard. The script had referred to Trump as a millionaire, which was technically accurate and seemed like an appropriate way to reference his wealth and business success in the context of the scene. However, Trump's team insisted that the description be changed to call him a billionaire instead, apparently because Trump felt that calling him merely a millionaire undersold his accomplishments and wealth. This put the producers in a slightly awkward position because they had to balance Trump's ego with the tone and humor of the show, and Fran Drescher came up with a clever compromise that satisfied everyone involved. Instead of calling Trump either a millionaire or a billionaire, she suggested using the word zillionaire in the script, which was playful and comedic, while also being vague enough that it didn't make any specific claims about Trump's actual net worth. The solution worked perfectly because it fit the show's humorous tone, avoided making Trump feel insulted or misrepresented, and prevented the writers from having to fact-check his financial status or make claims they couldn't verify. The episode aired with the revised dialogue, and Trump's cameo went off without any further complications. The incident became a funny behind-the-scenes story that revealed Trump's sensitivity about how he was portrayed in the media even during the 1990s. Fact 9. The show was nearly canceled after Season 1.
Is this unnatural obsession Maxwell has with his children? I can count the number of days I spent with my father on one hand.
7?
The Nanny eventually became one of the most successful sitcoms of the 1990s and turned into a global phenomenon that aired in more than 90 countries around the world and was dubbed into more than 30 different languages. But very few people remember how close the show came to never making it past its first season. When The Nanny premiered in November of 1993, the ratings were disappointing and inconsistent, with the show struggling to find an audience in its initial Wednesday nighttime slot on CBS. The network had high hopes for the series based on the strength of the pilot and Fran Drescher's charisma, but those hopes weren't translating into viewership numbers that justified keeping the show on the air. By the spring of 1994, CBS executives were seriously considering canceling The Nanny and replacing it with something else for the following season. The show's fate hung in the balance for weeks, while Drescher, co-creator Peter Mark Jacobson, and the rest of the production team waited nervously to hear whether they would be renewed or axed. What saved The Nanny was a combination of factors, including growing word-of-mouth buzz, slight improvements in the ratings toward the end of the season, and the network's willingness to give the show a second chance with a better time slot. CBS moved The Nanny to Monday nights for Season 2, where it was paired with other successful comedies, and the show's audience finally began to grow. From there, The Nanny built momentum, season after season, eventually becoming a reliable ratings performer and a cultural touchstone that influenced fashion, popularized catchphrases, and launched Fran Drescher into superstardom. The near cancellation after Season 1 makes the show's ultimate success even more remarkable. Fact 10. Fran's real-life marriage was crumbling during the show's romance.
I'm yours.
While millions of viewers tuned in each week to watch the will-they-won't-they romance between Fran Fine and Maxwell Sheffield, rooting for the two characters to finally admit their feelings and get together. A heartbreaking real-life drama was unfolding behind the scenes that made the on-screen love story bittersweet. Fran Drescher and Peter Mark Jacobson, who created the Nanny together and served as the driving creative force behind the series, had been married since 1978, and their partnership had been both romantic and professional for nearly 2 decades. However, as the show progressed through its 6-season run and Fran and Maxwell's relationship grew more complicated and romantic on screen, Drescher and Jacobson's real marriage was quietly falling apart. They separated during the show's final season and officially divorced in 1999, the same year The Nanny aired its series finale. The end of their marriage came with an additional revelation that added another layer of complexity to their story. Years after their divorce, Jacobson came out as gay, later explaining in interviews that he had struggled with his sexuality throughout their marriage, and that his inability to be honest about who he was had contributed to the breakdown of their relationship. Despite the painful end to their marriage, Drescher and Jacobson maintained a close friendship and continued working together professionally, demonstrating remarkable maturity and mutual respect. The parallel between their dissolving real-life marriage and the fictional marriage they were writing for their characters creates a poignant contrast that viewers at the time had no way of knowing about while watching the show. Fact 11. Elizabeth Taylor charged for photo touch-ups.
What happened?
Why do you always think something happened?
Lovely party.
When legendary actress Elizabeth Taylor guest starred on The Nanny, the cast and crew were understandably excited to work with one of Hollywood's most iconic stars, and Taylor proved to be gracious and professional throughout her time on set. She was happy to take photographs with anyone who wanted one, and she posed patiently for pictures with cast members, crew members, and production staff who wanted a memento from meeting one of the biggest movie stars in history. However, there was one unusual condition attached to these photo opportunities that caught everyone by surprise. Anyone who wanted a photograph with Elizabeth Taylor had to pay for the professional touch-up work that would be done to the photo before they received their copy. This wasn't a small fee for printing costs or a token amount. Taylor apparently employed a professional photographer or photo editor who would retouch the images to ensure that she looked perfect in every picture, and the people who posed with her were expected to cover the cost of this service. The arrangement was both practical and revealing, showing Taylor's awareness of her image and her desire to control how she appeared in photographs, even casual ones taken on a television set. Renee Taylor, who played Sylvia Fine on the show, later joked about the situation in interviews, quipping that she would happily pay for the touch-ups and that she would pay whatever Elizabeth Taylor was paying to have her own appearance improved in the photos. The comment was delivered with humor and affection, acknowledging both the absurdity of the situation and the privilege of getting to meet and work with such a legendary figure. The story offers a glimpse into Hollywood's obsession with image and the lengths to which major stars go to maintain their carefully crafted public personas. Fact 12. The kids' ages made no mathematical sense.
Hi, I'm Fran Fine.
Well, do come in.
Oh boy, do you have gorgeous tchotchkes.
Anyone who watched The Nanny carefully from beginning to end and tried to keep track of the Sheffield children's ages throughout the series would have found themselves increasingly confused because the timeline made absolutely no sense whatsoever. The show suffered from a continuity problem that many long-running sitcoms eventually face when writers prioritize storytelling over mathematical accuracy. But The Nanny's age inconsistencies were particularly egregious and impossible to ignore. Grace Sheffield was introduced in the pilot episode as a 6-year-old child, and the show made this fact very clear through dialogue and storylines appropriate for her age. However, just 2 years later in Season 3, Grace was suddenly 10 years old, meaning she had somehow aged 4 years, while the show had only progressed through 2 seasons of television time. The math simply didn't work, and it got worse as the series continued. Brighton Sheffield's age was even more problematic by the time the series finale arrived. In the final season, Brighton graduated from high school, which would typically happen when a student is 17 or 18 years old. However, based on his stated age earlier in the series and the amount of time that had actually passed within the show's continuity, Brighton should have only been a junior in high school, at most, when the series ended. The writers had essentially added extra years to the characters' lives to tell the stories they wanted to tell, particularly as the show moved toward its conclusion and needed the children to be older to justify certain plot developments. While this kind of continuity error is common in television comedies where aging child actors force writers to adjust timelines, the Nanny's version was particularly noticeable and became a frequent topic of discussion among fans. Fact 13. Security pre-screened all audience members.
Now, you cannot get color like that from out of a bottle. No way.
I'll be in my room doing my homework.
Really lights up her room, doesn't she?
The Nanny was filmed in front of a live studio audience, which was standard practice for sitcoms during the 1990s and helped create the authentic laughter and energy that made the show feel vibrant and alive. However, The Nanny's audience experience was different from most other shows because of security measures that were far more extensive than what was typical for the time. Fran Drescher insisted that every single person who wanted to attend a taping of the show had to be pre-screened by professional security before being allowed into the studio. This wasn't a simple bag check or metal detector screening. It was a thorough vetting process that made The Nanny one of the first television shows to hire what industry insiders called laugher wranglers, or audience coordinators who managed both the security aspects and the crowd control during tapings. The reason for these extensive security measures was deeply personal and tragic. In 1985, long before The Nanny made her famous, Drescher had been the victim of a horrific home invasion during which she was sexually assaulted at gunpoint, while her then-husband Peter Mark Jacobson was forced to watch. The trauma from that experience stayed with Drescher and understandably made her cautious about her personal safety, especially in situations where she would be performing in front of large groups of strangers. By requiring pre-screening for all audience members, Drescher could feel safe and secure while filming, which was essential for her to deliver the kind of energetic, joyful performance that The Nanny required. The security measures were respected by the production team and became standard procedure throughout the show's run, ultimately influencing how other shows thought about audience management and performer safety. Fact 14. The network forced the wedding that killed the show.
Well, I've never had any complaints before. What's the matter? These ladies don't have hips?
Not really, no.
And flat bums.
The relationship between Fran Fine and Maxwell Sheffield was the emotional heart of The Nanny, and the will-they-won't-they tension between the two characters kept viewers coming back week after week for 6 seasons. However, that carefully maintained romantic tension ultimately became both the show's greatest strength and its fatal weakness. By season 5, The Nanny's ratings had begun to decline from their peak, and CBS executives started pressuring the show's creators to resolve the central romantic storyline by having Fran and Maxwell get married. The network believed that viewers were getting frustrated with the ongoing delays and obstacles keeping the couple apart, and they thought a wedding would boost ratings and give the show a fresh direction. Fran Drescher and Peter Mark Jacobson, who had carefully crafted the slow-burn romance over multiple seasons, were reluctant to pull the trigger on a marriage because they understood that the romantic tension was fundamental to what made the show work. They argued with the network and tried to delay the wedding for as long as possible, but CBS ultimately gave them an ultimatum. Either Fran and Maxwell would get married or the show would be canceled due to declining ratings. Faced with that choice, the creators reluctantly agreed to the wedding, and Fran and Maxwell finally tied the knot in the season 5 finale. However, just as Drescher and Jacobson had feared, the wedding eliminated the core tension that had driven the series. Without the unresolved romantic feelings and the question of whether Fran and Maxwell would ever get together, the show lost much of its narrative engine. Season 6 struggled to find compelling storylines, ratings continued to decline, and CBS canceled The Nanny after just one season of marriage. Fact 15. Fran's sister existed but was ignored.
Oh, that's preposterous. I mean, what is she? 29, 30?
Oh, please. To what power?
One of the most persistent running gags throughout The Nanny involved Sylvia Fine, Fran's mother, constantly complaining about not being a grandmother and desperately pressuring Fran to get married and have children so she could finally enjoy grandchildren. Sylvia's desire for grandchildren was treated as an urgent, unfulfilled wish that drove many of her interactions with Fran and motivated numerous storylines throughout the series. The only problem with this entire subplot was that it made absolutely no sense given the show's own established continuity. Fran had a sister named Nadine who appeared in exactly 2 episodes during the entire 6-season run of the show, and Nadine had children, which mathematically meant that Sylvia was already a grandmother and had been one all along. The show simply chose to ignore this inconvenient fact because acknowledging it would have undermined one of Sylvia's defining character traits and eliminated countless jokes and storylines that relied on her desperate need to become a grandmother. Nadine appeared so infrequently and was referenced so rarely that many viewers probably forgot she existed at all, and the writers seemed content to pretend that Fran was an only child most of the time. This kind of selective memory about supporting characters is common in sitcoms where consistency takes a backseat to comedy. But The Nanny's version was particularly glaring because it involved a fundamental aspect of Sylvia's character motivation. The disconnect was never addressed or explained within the show itself, and Sylvia continued to pine for grandchildren and guilt-trip Fran about her unmarried, childless status right up until the series finale, completely ignoring the grandchildren she already had through her other daughter, who apparently didn't matter enough to mention.